Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, helping homeowners trade out old windows for modern, energy-efficient windows with curb appeal. Estimates at callmosby.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. There's no question that the May 16th tornado has changed the way North St. Louis looks and how it's experienced. The pace of recovery has been painfully slow for many Black St. Louisans, and this frustration exists against the backdrop of calls to address inequities and disinvestment on the city's north and west side that have been made for decades preceding last year's storm. Kelly McGowan, founder and executive director of Transform 314, is among the voices who've called for change. Her new documentary, produced with Newer World, is titled Transforming Our Legacy, A St. Louis Story. It premieres on May 13th at the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing and looks at the city's history of segregation, neglect, and its lasting impact on predominantly Black communities. And Kelly McGowan joins us in studio to share more. Kelly, welcome back to the show.
I'm so happy to be back.
So Kelly, for those who are hearing about Transform 314 for the first time, can you provide a quick primer on what the organization was created to do?
Yes, for sure. So Transform 314, we've been around for just shy of 3 years, and really it was created to bridge the disconnect between Black St. Louisans and our local government so we can be drivers of change that we know we need in our communities. And something that people don't realize is local government. It is so important when we're talking about our day-to-day lives and literally when we're talking about the fabric of our communities. However, folks aren't engaged in local government compared to like our federal level levels of engagement. And so we were created to really make sure people understood the importance of local government and most importantly, how people can authentically and effectively engage. So we try to be that bridge to make that more accessible and more tangible for folks to feel some type of hope and to really empower them and to know that they can be the drivers of change for their communities.
You use the word fabric. What does that fabric constitute? What is it made up of?
Yeah, so our focus on improving equitable built environments in the St. Louis region, our focus is on improving communities' built environments. So that is literally, that's our streets, that's our sidewalks, public transportation. That is literally how everything in our community is part of our community's built environment. And those things those are the fabric of our communities. Those are our building blocks. And when those items don't see the investments that they need, then they can really serve as a deterrent to just overall community well-being.
What parts of your personal and professional background prepared you to start this organization?
For sure, because if you would have told me 5-10 years ago I'd be doing this, I'd be like, no. But it really came through, growing up in the disinvested neighborhoods in the city of St. Louis and seeing and internalizing the different St. Louises, and then kind of going from there and just my parents instilling in me and my brother that this was by design. It isn't normal, it isn't by happenstance, and that we can make a difference in improving that. But how do we improve those inequities? And so through my professional just experiences, really realized that the center of our health really is looking at, again, the fabric of our communities, and ways that can be improved upon is through local level policy change. And a lot of folks, a lot of other organizations really weren't doing that. And so I thought it was a really great niche for us to fill in really educating people about that, because I didn't know anything about local government, what it did, the processes, until I had to do something work related to really navigate the social political climate to implement free wellness programming in North County. And so I saw the need for there to be an entity to kind of bridge that disconnect, to make that more accessible for us regular folks so we could be part of the change to improve our communities.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned 3 years ago is when the organization started, and in that time, you've convened residents of North St. Louis in monthly meetings, and you're sharing information on city policies, on city leadership that has shaped this built environment that you're talking about and quality of life. But at what point did the notion of a documentary of some kind start forming in your mind?
Geez. Well, I do have to also lift up one of our former board members. We were just having conversations, discussions around just figuring out ways that we can connect with people about the work that we do and also what needs to be changed and what needs to be improved collectively to move the region forward as we're talking about improving built-in equities. And just through just the opportunity for funding for our sole funder so far, we decided, to create some type of a form of media, and then it literally evolved into this documentary. And my former board member, Ryan, he will I was fighting because I'm like, a documentary about what? Who, me? I'm the person that's. So it took me out of my comfort zone, I will say, but I think it's just really important to make sure we are connecting our stories, and my family story in particular, because I think that is what really connects with people, and it helps to, again, drive that change, makes it more relatable. And yeah, so that was all him, because I was literally kicking and screaming about like a documentary.
So it's both blame and credit at the same time.
Yes.
This documentary, as you've mentioned, it has your family involved. It features your mother, Kimberly McGowan, and your grandmother, Gwendolyn Brown. It's matrilineal here. And then you talk with them about their memories and experiences growing up as Black St. Louisans in the city. And your grandmother, who was 92, I think, at the time.
So she was 91. Now she's 92.
She's 92. Yes, she made it. She actually made a note about that when you produced this film. She shared her lived experiences, over those 90 years of living in a segregated St. Louis.
We were a part of the city, but we really weren't a part of the city, because where we lived, all we saw was our kind, Black people, our entertainment, our education. We had everything right in the area where we live. We very seldom interacted with the white community. When we did, we rode, there were streetcars then, and buses, of course, so there were no Black bus drivers. Anything that was outside of our community was just white people. We really didn't realize that we were separate.
And that was Gwendolyn Brown, Kelly McGowan's grandmother, sharing her experience growing up in St. Louis during a time of segregation. It also featured in your documentary, Transforming Our Legacy, A St. Louis Story. You interview your mother, Kimberly McGowan, and she described how she came to realize that St. Louis had been and continues to be segregated.
I started at Scullin School, and then we moved over on Bartmer. I ended up at Emerson, attended Enright Middle. All Black schools. I attended all Black schools until I got to college. What was weird about Sumner, my mom knew my friends' parents. So I think that was my first knowledge of segregation, because I'm like, why do you know all my friends' parents?
Right.
She said, because we went to school with them. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, if you were Black, you could only attend Sumner Vashon and Washington Tech. So that was probably my freshman, sophomore year when I realized that they couldn't live north of Page and all the stuff that was going on.
So Kelly, when you were interviewing your mother and grandmother, you mentioned that they would share these stories with you as you were growing up. How did these stories then shape how you view and experience St. Louis?
I mean, first and foremost, it just put things into a very interesting perspective because that wasn't that long ago when we think about it. To know my grandmother, lived in the segregated St. Louis where Black people could only live and they had a certain number of schools that they could attend. Again, that wasn't that long ago. And then seeing that the aftermath of that with my mother and her generations, again, it wasn't that long ago. And so I think having that perspective that these systems are so pervasive started there, and they are continuing to perpetuate. I think that's what really has it's stuck with me, and that, again, it is extremely intentional, and these things are by design. And so I think that's something that really resonated with me. And also, like, there are a lot of people, they're not aware of this history. A lot of people are, and I'm very fortunate enough to have, like, a grandmother that has experienced that, to be able to share that with me, because it really puts things into a very, like I said, a perspective, a real perspective, that those things, it wasn't that long ago, and here we are now, and we still see those things, even though the lines technically are not there, but they're still there. And so I think that's something that I know I see, and it's something I'm working to address in collection with other folks.
We're speaking today with Kelly McGowan. She is the founder and executive director of Transform 314. Her new documentary, Transforming Our Legacy, A St. Louis Story, premieres on May 13th at the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing. Now, Kelly, another person who appears in your documentary is a childhood friend, Alan Perkins, and he describes himself as a hood missionary. Alan works in workforce development. And while you two are discussing your friendship and time sort of growing up together, you begin talking about the concept of St. Louis being two different cities and your personal reactions to the destruction of the May 16th tornado. Here's Alan.
Typically, to go to the north side, I used to always take Newstead. Take it all the way down Newstead, turn into Polk, it's, West Florissant. I remember the first time after the tornado, I was like, all right, let's do it. Or sometimes I go down Newstead and Natural Bridge coming back up. And I was like, let's do it. And I did it at nighttime. And I was just like, wow. All right. Daytime, I would say maybe 2-3 weeks later, I was like, I'm gonna go down to Newstead. Now this is during the day, I'm going the other way. Going down, I'm just like, wow. It's been, 6 months? My Newstead look the same. And like, that's the main street.
I know.
It's like, I just wanna start with that because like, even though I'm in workforce development, my background is architecture, construction, that's my background. And so like, I see the city from a different lens, you feel me? Because I love buildings, I love architecture, I love design, I love structures, art. And so I see the city differently because I'm trained to, see bricks, all this other stuff. And just looking like, wow. Go to Forest Park. Now I remember going down and just show two different cities. Like I remember going down Union to Forest Park. After the tornado, wow, because it was wrong. And the reality of it is that there are people who care and there are people who don't.
And that was Alan Perkins, one of Kelly McGowan's childhood friends, who's featured in her documentary, Transforming Our Legacy. So something that stood out to me there is the discussion of different lenses and being equipped to see or to perceive in certain ways. How much of that guided your decision about who to include in the documentary?
Yeah, so honestly, the folks that were included in the documentary, I mean, they're honestly some of the closest people in my life, people that I've known for, damn near my entire life. But I think we hold a lot of those similar perspectives and a lot of those similar experiences. And I wanted to be sure to, number one, leverage that for other people to see kind of me behind the curtain, behind the work, and also just really highlight and amplify, their stories, which, again, we share similar experiences, because I really do think that a huge issue that we are dealing with, we are battling ignorance. There are a lot of people that literally they don't know because, again, it isn't their lived experience to witness, to see, to live in communities that have been intentionally neglected for decades and decades and decades. And so I thought it was just important for us to be able to utilize this platform to really share that and amplify that for folks that may not be aware, and they may not know that these different cities within one city exist, because there are some people that genuinely have no clue because they haven't had that experience. They've seen the investment. They've seen the opportunities. They have a lot going for their communities. And so when you haven't experienced anything like that, it is foreign. And then you blame the people that live in those communities, not fully understanding just the full scope of history, of a lack of investment, of racist policies, of like all of these things that compound on one another that create, again, these different St. Louis's that we see and have experienced.
After hearing those anecdotes, from your mother and grandmother about how they grew up seeing two different sides of St. Louis, and when we were hearing the excerpt from the film of Alan discussing what he was seeing as he was driving up and down Newstead, you had your eyes closed. Like, what were you envisioning? Because this is not new to you. You were there. You had the conversation with him, and you've seen this completed documentary. Like, what was going through your mind as you sit in front of me?
I mean, even to this day, we're a year out from the devastation of the May 16th tornado, and I mean, it just takes your breath away when you have grown up in these areas and to have seen that devastation and to see how things don't change, and thinking about just my own experiences and my connections to these communities. It is heart shattering. Even, walking around, going to places. It took me a minute to be able to physically go to some of these places because it's just very emotional to see the memories, the lives that you had. I mean, it's just all gone. And my heart goes out to people. I mean, they live there. I don't, my home, my place of residence isn't in those communities. And so my heart goes out for people. That is their day to day. And so it's just very touching. I find it extremely emotional just because of the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Something else that stood out to me was the schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I have driven on Euclid, I think it is, and seen the schools that are captured on film. And you talked about, like, this is not history a long time ago. This is, yes, within the lifetime of your grandmother, nonagenarian, of your mother, but also for you, in your 30s, right? Why did you want to talk about the schools, even briefly?
Well, schools are the foundation of any community. And I know in the city of St. Louis, there's been a lot of struggles with a lot of school closures, a lot of population decline. And then you have these schools, these buildings, they're just sitting there, continuing to deteriorate and pose real, health hazards to the community. And so I think when you see schools and buildings that are just there dilapidating and in decline, that serves as a bit of a gauge and a pulse of that community. And it signals, as we're talking about looking to revitalize communities and neighborhoods, it makes it very challenging. Because from the outsiders, it may signal, this neighborhood is not worth investing in. Mm-hmm. And so I think really centering how important schools are as an anchor to any community, and that Euclid right there, you have two schools, literally right across the street from one another. One closed in '07, '08. I think it may be demolished now in the near future. And then Washington did reopen. But still, at the time, they weren't open. And so it's like, how can we revitalize a community when, again, we're talking about the anchors of those communities may not be present or may not be longer present. And so I just really wanted to lift that up. And again, like my personal connection to those schools, because I attended both of those schools. And so it's just like, again, I just really wanted to lift that up because I think sometimes we overlook schools and the importance that they serve in any community. And when we have those schools declining, it is a sign and it's a signal that we really need to really figure out how we can revamp and revitalize neighborhoods.
The title of this short documentary film is Transforming Our Legacy. What is our legacy now? And what do you mean? Who do you mean when you say our?
So when I say our, I mean our the collective of St. Louis and the city of St. Louis. I think our city is, we have a history. I don't have to recount it. We all know it. Our city, our region has a history of racism. And stop, period. And we see those issues continue to perpetuate and decline. They may not be as overt and explicit as maybe they were in the past, but we are still dealing with the impacts of that. And so I think as a collective, we need to take ownership of our stuff. Period. We all need to take ownership of that. It's not just on communities that are living in disinvested areas to take it on. It's everybody, including folks that live in those more affluent neighborhoods. We all need to take stock of the racist past of our city, and most importantly, how can we move past that to address that? Our city cannot thrive if a part of it is in decline. Like, that's just, it doesn't work like that. And so I think when I say our legacy, I mean, it's all of ours. Everyone that calls the city of St. Louis home, it is on all of us to make sure that we not only acknowledge the harms that have been done, and also we have to work collectively and have some hard conversations about what we need to do to truly make sure we live in an equitable city.
You talked earlier, Kelly, about what people know and people who don't have the history, people who don't have the stories, the specific stories that are in this doc. There's also a point at which you touch on the Team 4 plan and For the Sake of All. And these are, the first is a public document. The second is a study. There are sort of roughly 4 years in between where we are sitting now, and then there's a documentary series that I watched about the Team 4 plan, and then For the Sake of All. Who needs to see this within the Black community as well? Because you talked about schools, and there are some people maybe who they feel and experience what is in the present without necessarily knowing those pieces. Did you have to make a conscious decision not to make it a deep history lesson?
Yeah, first off, we don't want to bore people. We don't want people to be even more sadder or feel even less hopeful. But I think I wanted to focus on things that people may not be aware of. And even the Team 4 plan. When I learned about this several years ago and I had a conversation with my mother about it, she had no clue that even existed. So I wanted to focus on what are some tidbits or nuggets or jewels or what are some pieces that maybe people are not aware of that really, again, speaks to things being intentionally designed.
And that's that team 4.
Yes.
Yeah, the plan to benign neglect and
And it's literally, like I said, it is literally what we see and what we continue to witness in the patterns of development or lack thereof in our city. And this started, this plan was developed in the mid 70s. And we're in 2026. And again, it is very telling about the ways that our city, not officially, but we see the impacts of how it is marching orders according to that plan, and what areas are deemed investable and what areas are not deemed investable. It's very eye-opening.
What has making this documentary revealed to you or told you about the work to be done?
Well, I will say that it has revealed that, obviously we know there's a lot of work to do. But I think to me, it has revealed just the importance of, again, it's going to sound cliche, but like it really is going to take all of us to address the inequities that we see in our city and also in our broader region. It cannot just be on one organization transform. We're small but mighty. But it can't just be one organization. It can't just be one neighborhood. It can't just be one entity or a couple of folks. It really has to be the collective. It's so many different layers and levels to it. And I think through this process of the documentary, it showed just the importance of us starting to, again, have these conversations, to tell these stories, to make sure we are connecting as people. And as humans. And I think that's something that is extremely important to do. And that's part of the work in how do we move forward. That's part of it. It's not the full story, but I think that's part of it. And it's something we can't overlook if we're serious about making changes.
Mm-hmm. And as we close, transforming our legacy, a St. Louis story, it begins with footage from one of the community meetings that took place a couple months after the May 16th tornado last year. And then it ends with an exchange between you, your mother, and grandmother sitting in what I think is your grandparents' lovingly appointed living room, and a note about what is within control. How does that speak to, what you want this documentary to do or to catalyze? And maybe more specifically, where would you like people to be watching this?
Well, again, I didn't want to create something that was all doom and gloom and our city sucks and we can't do nothing about it. No. And I think that's what the core of Transform 314 is and why it was created, is because sometimes we feel like these systems are so beyond reach and beyond ways for us to really authentically engage. And local government is literally home. The people that determine how the budgets are allocated, developmental decisions, these folks, they literally live among us. They're at the grocery store. They're everywhere. You can literally touch these people, and they represent us. And I feel like that's a lot more tangible than our senators or our Congress people. And so I really want folks to understand, paying attention to what's happening at the local level. It is extremely important. It's extremely tangible. And again, that is something that is within our control. We can't control what happens at the state level. We can't control what happens at the federal level. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things happening. But to me, you can control what happens at home. And for me, that is what local government is. And I think that is what people need to really tap into and focus in on. There's a lot of things that are at stake right now in our city. The backdrop of, obviously, the aftermath of last year's tornado. But I think people really need to tap in and pay attention. There are a lot of opportunities for folks to engage in whatever's of interest to them. And I think this is the opportunity for folks to be able to tap into other organizations, to start asking their older people their stances on things and why they vote this way or why they didn't vote this way, because they represent us. And so if there was any, I don't know what more important time isn't now for folks to start to engage and ask those questions of those people that represent them.
Mm-hmm. Kelly McGowan is the founder and executive director of Transform 314. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet and I, Elaine Cha.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.